Bullet hello, Shmupcast. Well, it's been a while, and for that I apologize. Hopefully forcing myself to do this extra credits little thing gets me back into the groove on doing a proper Shmupcast on the regular. But today is different. It's an extra credit episode where I'm going to give my first impressions review of a super puzzle fighter-like game called Crystal Crisis, available on PS4 and Switch, which is releasing on the 28th, and that should be tomorrow. The version I have with me is the Switch, and before you write your complaints to bullethelloemail@gmail.com, again, that's bullethelloemail@gmail.com, there is a good reason for this extra credit episode. No, I did not get a review copy, and no, I didn't steal this, I bought it at the store. They just happened to have it. Shabam. But taking advantage of this retail accident, or whatever it is, who knows, I did do a box opening, and if you'd like to watch me fumble through, a type of format I am not comfortable with, way out of my comfort zone, go check out my channel at youtube.com/Sensei Pong, or youtube.com/Mr. Sensei Pong. Links are down below in the description. But since this is the Shmupcast and I haven't done much of anything online for a long time, I do want to mention about 4 shmups here on my list of notes here of things that I've recently played or that have come out recently that you should definitely check out because they are definitely good. First one is Devil Engine on the PS4 and Nintendo Switch, and what this is real quick is a side-scrolling horizontal kind of almost 32-bit era type shmup. It's definitely on the harder side, but it's definitely fun, and oh boy, the graphics are beautifully rendered pixel art. And if you enjoy that sort of thing and enjoy just watching yourself die as you explode because it's animated so beautifully, go definitely check out Devil Engine. It should also be on PC Steam. I don't have that on my notes. I don't know why. Second game here on my list is Horizon Shift 81, which is available on the Switch exclusively. It's kind of a rehash, reimagining of Horizon Shift, which is available on PC Steam. But what this is, it's a pretty unique fixed shooter, kind of in the style of an early 80s arcade game, but it's really good. You should definitely check that out if you like fixed shooters. Another game here on my list is Blackbird, which is available on PC and Switch. And apparently it was the number one selling indie game of last year in Japan. So that was actually kind of a selling point for me. I was like, well, that's interesting. You don't really hear much about indie games in Japan because the indie scene isn't huge there. But either way, if you like things like Fantasy Zone, definitely check out Blackbird. It's a fun little score chaser. And of course, I have to have my little twin stick recommendation here on the list. And for that, I have Iron Cryptical, which just released out on the Switch. It's also previously available on PC, Steam, PS4, and Xbox One. And if this sounds familiar to you, it should, because the original name was Iron Fisticle, which is kind of funny and a weird name. I can kind of see why they changed it to Cryptical. They probably got too many comments. And not exactly a shmup, but it's a collection. I finally picked up the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection, which is available on the Xbox One, PS4, and Switch. And oh boy, that is an excellently, beautifully crafted museum of sorts of old pre-Neo Geo SNK titles, and it's pretty cool to just kind of rummage through. And it was funny when I was playing it, I literally spent an hour just reading through all the article-y kind of things, it was a museum, and I realized to myself pretty quickly, I was like, dude, I'm not even playing the game. It's been 45 minutes. There's just so much extra content in there just to kind of rummage through. And I like my history and facts and whatever. It's pretty fun. Good stuff. But with that, let's get right into this. So Crystal Crisis for the PS4 and Switch. I have the Switch version. It's developed by Pikii or Pikii. That's spelled Pikii. I don't know how to pronounce that. Published by Nicalis, which I actually heard someone pronounce it Nicalis, Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know. If that name sounds familiar to you, probably should. They do a lot of kind of indie titles and such, like, well, publishing wise. Some other games that Nicalis has done in the past include, I want to say they published Cave Story, they did Code of Princess, It'll Do 2, The Binding of Isaac, that kind of stuff. Good times. Blade Strangers. And Pikii as a dev house has did work on Blade Strangers. I'm not 100% sure. I could be wrong about that. Either way. Oh, and they also did VVVVVV back in 2016. If Moby Games is correct. I'm doing like a quick search on Pikii. I don't know too much about Pikii, but with what I've played of Crystal Crisis, I am now interested in that developer. But I'll get into that in a second. This is actually a pretty good game. Just right off the bat, it's a puzzle game, if you don't know what it is. If I can explain Crystal Crisis in one sentence, basically it's a very competent Super Puzzle Fighter 2 clone with kind of an unlockable columns-like clone inside, which is pretty cool. And when I unlocked that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is kind of spoiler territory, but it's almost like columns in one of the modes. We'll get into that in a second. But let's talk about the gameplay if you don't know what Super Puzzle Fighter 2 is. So basically, it's a PvP one-on-one type of puzzle game where you're matching colors and blocks and groupings of 2 come down and drop and fill into your play field. And you want to match the colors, and of course, you can rotate the pieces so it's, a long rectangle or, kind of a column of 2 pieces. And when you match the colors, they don't automatically clear out with a certain amount. But what you could do is match the colors, by a 2x2 square, and then it becomes a gem. And once that happens, it actually powers up and gives you a bigger combo and point meter and all that kind of stuff, which ends up translating to how much junk you're throwing in at your opponent. So you can fill up their screen and make them lose the game, which counts as a KO. This type of puzzle game was originally a spin-off of Street Fighter 2, and they would use a lot of Street Fighter characters and blah, 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 and that's what kind of drawed people in as kind of like the little bait on the string with hey, look, you love Ryu, and you love Ken, and you love Chun-Li. Now check out this fun little puzzle game we made. But since Capcom hasn't really done much with the Puzzle Fighter license, I know they came out with a mobile game last year, then closed it down because they didn't market it at all and nobody knew about it. And once I finally got wind of it, it was 1 month before they closed down because I didn't hear about it. Freaking Capcom. I was excited about this and I've been keeping my eye on it. Crystal Crisis. But now, back to the gameplay. When you do match all the colors, you can kind of create little chains and little snaking, things of, the colors all matching. But what does happen is that you get, these power gems. And I think in Puzzle Fighter they were simply called power gems. In Crystal Crisis, there's 2 different types. There's the polycrystal and the spark crystal. And the polycrystal... Not the polycrystal. The spark crystal kind of acts like what the original power gem did. So they come in all different colors, but they also come in a sparkling rainbow chromatic color as well. But I'll get into that in a second. So what the spark crystal and the power gem does in this type of puzzle game is that, let's say you created, a 4x4, a 2x3 big gem of whatever color it is, and it's connected a couple on the side by 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever. But they have to be touching at least either on the top and bottom and side to side. And then when that power gem of that color hits that color, if let's say you made a green gem chain, right? And then a green spark crystal comes down and touches that green crystal, it basically explodes all of that same color, so that whole green chain that you've created. And with this, you can save your power crystals and have them sitting on that, and that can actually help cause cascades, and then which builds up to combos. Cascades similar to Puyo Puyo, where the power gems start falling on other colors, and you can do a little bit of planning, and that's actually where some of the strategy comes in when you're trying to set up your play field. But what that spells out to is kind of like Puyo Puyo junk blobs. You get a thing called the timer gems, which drop down on your opponent's playfield, and there's always like a 5-turn timer. So like every time they drop a gem, that timer goes down. You can't clear out that gem unless you have like a power crystal, but once it hits 0, it turns into a regular gem. Now, what's interesting about this is that choosing a character does make a difference, because the kind of junk that drops down on your opponent depends on your character. Like all the characters have their own junk pattern. So let's say you do like a crazy combo, right? You've knocked out like 15 of one color, which drops down all the other gems that were on top of it, and that actually did a cascade, and you clear out another, like, let's say 8, which for some reason you're a puzzle game genius, and now you're going down to your 3rd cascade, and that clears out like 6, which ended up causing like a drop on the side, and then you get a 4th cascade. You've done a crazy junk attack, right? Now what that means is that these patterns are broken up into a 4x6 pattern of squares. So because it was such a huge attack, once you go through that 4x6 pattern, it repeats itself. So what actually happens is that the more you play, and if you memorize all these patterns, you know what your opponent's going to be doing to you. You know what their junk gems are. And if you get good at that, you can prepare for that sort of thing. And that's where some more strategy comes into play. And that's actually why Super Puzzle Fighter 2, for the most part, is kind of a cult classic for a lot of like puzzle gaming nerds out there, because once you get good, oh boy, you can get very good just by memorizing what all the character patterns are and what all the kind of like attack patterns would be, so you can prepare for that sort of thing. With this in mind, at some point, you might like certain characters over others, or if you can set it up just right, maybe you can figure out like combo systems with certain characters, or like how to like counter against other characters. And obviously, with that, some people prefer certain characters over others. But, at that point, it's really just kind of like personal tastes and how you play. With this, what's interesting about Crystal Crisis and really sets it apart, and actually I think kind of makes it a little bit better than Puzzle Fighter in a lot of ways, is just all the random things they've added to this. So there's a burst gauge, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's been a while since I played Puzzle Fighter. I don't believe there were special moves with any of the characters. The only thing that was distincting them apart was just their junk patterns. Now with Crystal Crisis, you have a thing called a burst gauge with special burst attacks, and it can either be defensive or offensive, which is activated with the ZL and the ZR on the Switch. And depending on the character, they have different kind of, the moves are very different from each other, and some of them you have to fill up the gauge all the way to the top. Others, it's split up into like 3s. So like the level of attack or defensive move that you're doing on yourself or your opponent. So with that, I've always, there's one other game that's actually kind of a Super Puzzle Fighter clone, and that's Heroes Never Lose, Professor Puzzler's Perplexing Ploy, which does have special moves as well. And I've always enjoyed that. It's when it comes to a Puzzle Fighter-like game. There aren't that many out there, mind you, so the pool of, picking from is pretty small. But because their special moves do differ from character to character quite drastically, there is probably a type of meta where like maybe one character is just objectively better than another. But with this, you can kind of gauge, well, I really like this one character's defensive burst more than this one, and it tends to help me out more in the situations I get myself into during gameplay, so I like playing as this character. The two characters I actually really enjoyed playing as was Curly and the Zombie. Curly being a character from Cave Story. I'll get to the characters in just a second. But one of her defensive move, just to give you an idea, her defensive move is broken up into 3 different parts. So like, you tap it once to get rid of one part, and it does, a small level defensive move. If you tap the ZL button twice, it does a kind of a medium sized one. And if you tap it 3 times, it does a big defensive move. And what this defensive move is, she takes out her gun and starts shooting at the board, and it clears out, the bottom lines of her playfield. So, like, this kind of defensive move really comes in handy if, like, let's say you're on the ropes and you're not doing very well, and your playfield is filling up. You're like, oh no, well, at least I saved my burst gauge. So, you tap 3 times, and at that point, she, like, knocks out, like, I think it's, like, maybe 6 or 7 or 8 lines on the bottom, and it all drops down and gives you like a whole bunch of space. If you tap it once, it does that small one, so it only like clears out 1 bar. And then if you tap 2 times, I think it clears out 3. I don't remember off the top of my head. I've only played maybe about like 5 hours up to this point, so I've been messing around with a lot of the characters, but I was really liking Curly's defensive move. Also but to give you an idea of what her offensive move is, it's like this, since it is a 3-part gauge, you can do either 1 tap, 2 taps, or 3 taps, depending on how much your gauge is filled. But it's a very similar kind of attack to the defense. She pulls out her gun again, starts shooting at the opponent's screen. Her offensive move actually helps quite a bit when they're at least halfway through their halfway full on the battlefield, because what she does is she shoots the same amount of lines that she would defensively, but since it's offensive, she starts shooting the bottom gems, and then they disappear and then come out and appear up at the top and drop down as the junk time gems. So, at that point, it's harder to get rid of those time gems than just the regular gems, because they don't turn into regular gems until the timer hits 0. So that's pretty cool. Another character to give you an idea of how like this defensive and offensive thing works is with the zombie. His offensive move is this zombie infection, where like he like barfs on the opponent's side and then infects like either, it's another 3-part gauge. So like either with 1 tap, he infects 1 block in the entire playfield and turns it into an infected zombie block, which can be cleared out, but it has to be cleared out next to something you already are clearing out. So let's say it was originally a green gem and you clear out a red gem next to it. That red gem explodes and explodes the infected one. But what's cool about the zombie gems is that it slowly starts spreading. So the more zombie gems there are, the harder it's going to be to get rid of, because you can't just get rid of them all in one go unless you have the polycrystal. Now, the polycrystal is kind of like the spark crystal, but instead of doing like a chain, let's say your playfield is scattered and looks like a mess, but there's a lot of red gems here and there and everywhere, right? And none of them are connected. So if you do a spark crystal on one of those, maybe you only take out 1 or 2 gems, right? Maybe you're really bad at this game. This polycrystal comes in handy, because once you hit that red gem, all the red gems on the playfield disappear. So that's pretty cool. And there was another gem, I don't remember exactly what it does, but it does like this weird like kind of spark thing where it like knocks out several gems or a few gems around it. It kind of looks like a floating like orb with like a little gem in the middle, like a little teeny tiny one. I don't remember exactly what that does. Now, one interesting difference between Crystal Crisis and Super Puzzle Fighter 2, and I keep referencing Super Puzzle Fighter 2 only because diehard fans of Puzzle Fighter are going to be constantly thinking to themselves in the back of their head, well, how does this match up? Now, one neat thing that I have to say really adds to a lot of fun like strategy and just kind of gameplay mechanic is wrapping. Now, in the original Puzzle Fighter, your playfield is the playfield. You can't, it's like Tetris or Puyo Puyo. You can't wrap around. If you push your whatever pieces you're dropping down to the side, it hits the wall of your playfield and you can't go any farther than that. With the wrapping, you can actually split your gems in half. well, your blocks of 2 in half. So you can have, let's say you rotate it so it's laying flat. One on the left side is a blue one, and on the right side is a green one, right? You move it all the way to the left, but stop at the green one. Now your green is going to drop on the left side, and your blue one is going to drop on the right side. Pretty cool stuff. Now, and then at that point, it's easier to kind of like maybe set up chains at that point, because you could be like, okay, well, I'm building a chain of blue blocks over here, so I don't want the green one messing that up. I want to make a bigger power gem. So with that, it's actually pretty cool. I didn't, something that simple, I didn't think it would change the gameplay that much, but it really kind of does. And for that, I really enjoy it. It gives me, kind of a puzzle gaming nerd, that like real good satisfying like tingle in my bones anytime I actually set up something like really crazy and like with big gems and chains moving across the board, so I can just like do like one crazy combo like halfway through the game, which might win me the game if I do it correctly. Now, you might be thinking, well, that sounds annoying. I want my puzzle fighter to be like old school puzzle fighter. Luckily, you can turn off the wrapping, so that's not that big of a deal. But it's there if you want it, because honestly, that's what kind of separates this from puzzle fighter. It's that wrapping, it's those special attacks, and it's all this kind of cool stuff that they've added to the original formula that really sets it apart. So I'm really enjoying just the core gameplay of the base game. Now you may be thinking to yourself, well, Pong, you're playing on the Switch. How does it run? How does it feel? How does the controls work? For that, I do want to say I did come across like some really minor frame drops. It wasn't anything that it would actually like completely throw me out of like any kind of groove that I have going on in the middle of a match. Also, one other thing I would complain about would be just the load times. Like just before each match, it's like you're kind of sitting there for like 15 seconds. It's like, really, this is Puzzle Fighter, man. Come on, I shouldn't be sitting around for 30 seconds waiting for a match, or waiting for a cutscene or anything. It's load times felt a little bit long. I think 30 seconds is exaggeration, but it still felt kind of long. Now, I understand I got an early copy just by random chance. So maybe these load times will be fixed in some sort of patch either on day one or, within the first week or two. So I'm not exactly worried, but it was, I know like some people would find that very annoying. So that's definitely something I do want to mention, is the load times. Control-wise, it feels great. It feels like a crisp and clean arcade puzzling fighting game, whatever this is called, a PvP puzzler. So, control-wise, it's great. I like it. It's not bad. At that point, it really just depends on what kind of controller you have, obviously. Because, the Pro controller does have some moments of, like, misinputs if you're, like, really die-hard dedicated to that D-pad. Which I am, so, I've figured out a way of playing with the D-pad where it doesn't mess me up that bad. But if I, like, start going way too quickly, it messes me up all the time. Which is always my problem. I like to move like really fast when I'm doing like these kind of puzzle games. So if you do get super competitive about this, like online and whatnot, maybe don't stick with the Pro controller. Go with something that wouldn't give you the misinputs. Maybe even the hitbox. Who knows? I don't know. Unless you don't mind the analog stick. But for something like this, I feel like the analog stick just has too much throw. I need like that crisp button hitting. So maybe actually the Joy-Cons would be the best choice for this, as long as you don't have that drifting issue. Moving on, how does this game look graphically? Now, I hate making this comparison again, but back in Super Puzzle Fighter 2, they didn't take like the, your classic Street Fighter sprites, the kind of cool looking, badass looking characters, and just throw them into a puzzle game. They actually made them chibi. And with this, they did kind of the same thing. They took all the characters and kind of chibi-fied them and made them kind of cute looking and kind of, but artistically consistent with itself. So it's all, it's all pretty cool. And it looks great. And the designs are awesome. And the play field is great. And actually, one neat thing that I highly appreciate, I don't have a problem with it, but if you do, there is a colorblind mode. There's also different color schemes and different kind of stuff. So if you're really into like customizing what colors the blocks are, you can do that. Or if you do have mild color blindness or severe color blindness, there's an option for a colorblind mode. So I thought that was pretty cool. Now, moving on to another little basic little thing about this game, the music. How is the music, Pong? When I'm playing this game, I want to jam out or like kind of relax. Maybe you're not hardcore about it. Maybe you're not like super into puzzle games, but you like playing them casually, and maybe the music is important to you. So with taking that into consideration, I can easily say that the music is great. The soundtrack is amazing. I actually looked up some of the soundtrack, well, for this podcast, because all the bumper music is going to be music from the game. But just to give you an idea of what the music kind of sounds like, it has a good variety of different kinds of music because all the different variety of characters there are. And I'll get into the characters in just a second, but it's a crossover game, so you get like different versions and remixes of, different character themes or songs from their games and whatnot. But it's pretty cool. I like the music, and it's pretty relaxing. But still, like, some of the songs, of course, keep that kind of tension alive when you're playing this sort of game. So maybe you prefer one song over the other. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But the music is great. I like the music. They're pretty good remixes. Definitely something you can jam out to. And if you're into buying music soundtracks from video games, if you like your kind of nice, chunky, like, puzzly kind of, like, workout music, this might be a good one for you. Now, onto the characters, because you might be curious, well, what characters are you talking about when you say crossover? Now, this is a Nicalis game, and this isn't the first crazy crossover they did. With Blade Strangers, it's a fighting game, and they have a lot of characters in there. I want to say Shovel Knight is even in there, too. Now, I'm not super familiar with Cave Story, despite being a Metroidvania nut, kind of, to some degree. They have the two Cave Story characters in there. They have Quote and Curly. I'm picking up the instruction manual right here. Yes, it came with an instruction manual. How novel is that? It feels weird saying that at this point, but if you pick up physical games yourself, they don't come with instruction manuals anymore. Very rarely do they. But this one came out with like a 31-page instruction manual, which is insane. And thank you, Nicalis, for doing that. I highly appreciate that. This is a very cool little instruction manual. But back to the characters. What characters are there? There's Quote and Curly from Cave Story. And they seem like kind of your standard characters with very straightforward attacks and bonuses. Like Quote, his thing is like, whereas Curly, shoots at the bottom and throws up on the top. Quote actually has kind of a drilling attack. So like his defensive thing is actually like clearing out like a column of 2 down like wherever you aim the drilling missile, quote unquote. So that's pretty cool. Aban and Tina from 1001 Spikes. I'm not really familiar with that game, but there's one more character from 1001 Spikes, I think. But I'll move on from there in a little bit. What's actually kind of neat about Aban is that he's one of those characters that has like a 1 bar like burst gauge, so you have to fill it up all the way to the top. It's not bad. It's because his defensive move is the Sapphire, which is actually just a polycrystal. So that definitely helps when you are in a kind of a jam. So save that for when you need it. Another character here is Ninja, which I have no idea what game they're from, but I did like some digging around on the internet, and apparently Ninja might be coming out, is from a game that's currently unreleased, but Nicalis will end up releasing that game soon. So maybe they have a name, I don't know, or maybe they're just known as the Ninja. And then surprise, surprise, one of the weird like kind of surprise characters, I was like, how did they get the licensing for him? Was Astro Boy, aka, well, his name is Adam, but from the Astro Boy anime. So, if you're a big anime fan, or like classic anime fan or a Tezuka fan, you could be like, dude, they got Astro Boy. I'm definitely picking this up now. I don't know. Maybe you're into that sort of thing. But Astro Boy's pretty cool. I'm just happy he's in there. When my kids saw him and they're like, wait, this is an Astro Boy game? I was like, no, this is like Smash Brothers, but with a puzzle game. And somehow they got Astro Boy in there. I don't know how they got him in there, but they did. There's another character in here called Knight, who is actually from an indie game I'm not familiar with called like Hydra Knight or something like that. He's not bad. He's pretty cool. And then you have Princess Solange from an indie beat-em-up game called Code of Princess. Pretty good beat-em-up game if you're into that sort of thing. Moving on, we got Zombie, which it was another character. I was like, is this just a generic zombie? I'm not sure. But in that digging around to figure out who the ninja was, apparently Zombie's also from an unreleased Nicalis game, which should be coming out within like the next year or two or something like that. I don't really know. But he's definitely one of my favorite characters to play, mostly because of his viral outbreak attack. That's what it's called. Yeah, see, in this instruction manual, it actually tells you what their attacks and defense names are. So, oh, hey, and it actually tells you whether or not it's a 3-part burst or a 1-part burst. So, yeah, defensive burst is the antidote. To give you an example, starting from the top, change normal crystals on your grid to the current most common color. At level 3, 9 crystals will be changed. So that's pretty cool. That definitely will help with like breaking up any like scattered patterns that you may have. He also has like the worst junk pattern out of the bunch because it's just like mostly green blocks. And that's my only complaint about the Zombie. I think it kind of helps balance out the effectiveness of Viral Outbreak, because Viral Outbreak can be really annoying. And then another character here is Helen, who I have no idea where she's from. Maybe send in your angry emails at bullethelloemail@gmail.com. Again, that's bullethelloemail@gmail.com, and I'll probably read your email there. But her moves include By the Gods and Curse of the Skull. So I don't know what that reference is, but she's pretty fun. And then here's another character, the playable character that I was like surprised. I was like, what? Hold up, why? But he's fun. It's cool that he's in there. It's Johnny Turbo. Yep, that's right, Johnny Turbo. Johnny Turbo's Arcade, if you're not familiar with the old like ad campaign from the 90s. But Johnny Turbo was the official mascot of the TurboGrafx 16. And his whole shtick was basically talking crap about like the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, and claiming that the TurboGrafx 16 was way better, regardless of how slanderous or false his accusations would be. But it's fun that Johnny Turbo is in there. He's the only English speaking character in the bunch. All of them are voice acted, but his is like the only English one, and it's kind of funny. But he's fun. He's got kind of a neat attack pattern. And then another surprising playable character in here is Blackjack, which I've never seen Blackjack, but Blackjack is another Tezuka anime character, and for that, I might have to watch Blackjack because Astro Boy is pretty cool. I would love to see what Tezuka has done outside of Astro Boy. But yeah, if you're into anime, you've got your 2 anime characters right there. You got Astro Boy and Blackjack. Now, President Thompson, or just Thompson, I have no idea what game he's from, but his burst moves are kind of funny. It's Veto Power and Executive Order, and his attack pattern for the junk gems kind of make the American flag, and I thought that was kind of funny and kind of cute. I haven't really messed around with him too much, so I can't really tell you how effective Executive Order or Veto Power is, but if you're into Thompson, President Thompson, there you go. Another kind of surprising crossover character here is Isaac from Binding of Isaac. That's right, yep, Binding of Isaac. I thought that was kind of neat. Though Binding of Isaac was published by Nicalis, so like not too surprising if they're going to do a crazy crossover, but pretty cool that he's in there. Another character in here is Hunter, which I just remembered is the other character that was the surprise character from an unreleased game that should be releasing by Nicalis at some point. I don't know if that's his actual name or they're just kind of keeping that hidden and just calling him the Hunter. But he almost has like a... I don't know why my mind keeps on wanting to say Burl Ives. Burl... Why Burl Ives? No, not Burl Ives. Simon Belmont from Castlevania. If you know who Burl Ives is, you realize how ridiculous this like thought train is. But he has kind of like a Simon Belmont-y thing going on, because his two moves are Morningstar and Holy Water, and he's like, he doesn't say "Begone, monster," he doesn't say that kind of stuff. But I don't know. He's pretty cool. His attack pattern is... It's not completely randomized, because not all these characters are very random, like their attack patterns are like super random or anything. But I feel like his junk pattern definitely is more helpful than others. And if another character here is Kawase from a 3-part trilogy of platformer games called Umihara Kawase, which was, I want to say dates back to the 90s? But like they came out with HD remakes of all these, and they're available on Steam. I don't know who Kawase is, and I'm not familiar with the platformer. I'm kind of surprised I'm not. I want to say I might have seen like seen the Kawase games at some point while like rummaging through Steam, but never really picked them up. But I did a little bit of research, because I was researching some of the characters I wasn't like super familiar with here, and if you are curious about the kind of game she's originally from, it's like apparently like a grappling hook platformer. So something maybe along the lines of like Flint Hook recently or Bionic Commando. So I might have to pick up the Kawase games if they ever come out to console, but I know they're out on Steam, so I might have to pick those up, because I do like my grappling hook platformers, regardless of how specific that is. Because it's gotten super glowing reviews. So I'm like, all right, well, if it's that good, I might as well just pick it up to see if I like it. Another character here that's playable is Jim, who I'm basing this off the story mode of Crystal Crisis, but I think he's the father of the 1001 Spikes characters, and he's kind of a bad guy. He's kind of neat. Another character here is Akuji, or aka Akuji the Demon, who comes from another like really obscure Japanese indie game called Akuji the Demon, which has like pretty poor reviews, but like maybe his games came out on DS. I'm not sure. I want to say he's PC only, but like they're really pulling some like deep indie digs here, and it's even testing my knowledge. And then you have Elise, which I'm assuming is related to Akuji to some degree. I'm not sure how. I think she might be a vampire or a demon. I'm not sure, but it's pretty neat. She's kind of a cool character. She's got some pretty cool like PvP moves. Like Cursed is a good one. That's her attack move, and what that does is basically causes the I'll just read the description here. It causes the crystal pairs that fall on the opponent's grid to rotate and move unpredictably until both the drop counter and the timer run out. At level 3, the effect lasts longer for 8 drops, plus the timer. So that can really mess someone up. And when I was playing in the story mode and in the arcade mode of Crystal Crisis, going against Elise is annoying when she throws curse at you, because holy balls, that messes you up. And finally here on the character list we have Balos, which I'm not sure where he's from. He might be from Cave Story. Like I said, I never actually finished Cave Story. I don't know, but Balos is like another like super big bad guy type character, but he's got some pretty cool, he's got some pretty effective burst attacks, but he doesn't have the 3-bar thing. You have to fill it up all the way. His attack, just to give you an example, is Constrict, which basically smashes the playfield by one column on each side, so that can really mess someone up, I think, if they get nervous about that sort of thing. It's completely counterable, but like at the same time, if you're playing against someone inexperienced, I feel like Balos might feel a little bit OP. And that is all the characters. and that equals 20 playable characters total. You start the game off with 10 characters, and you have to unlock the other 10. I haven't unlocked everybody just yet. I'm getting close. I think I only have like 3 or 4 characters I need to unlock, but I think you can unlock them all through story mode, because that's how I unlocked like a good chunk of them, or most of them. But we'll get into story mode in just a sec, because there's one thing about story mode which is pretty cool. But character-wise, there's a good variety. I like just the kind of the quirky nature of like all these weird random characters. Some of them you definitely would probably recognize if you're into indie games, while others you'd just be like, well, who the heck is that? I'm going to look up that game. That looks interesting. Or this character's quirky and they're fun and or seem cool or whatever, or that's a cool bad guy. I want to check out what game they're from. So, maybe you look into that sort of thing and you're like, oh, all right. You find another game that you're into. So that's pretty cool. I like the variety there. It's like definitely feels like a Smash Brothers thing. So it's like when they first introduced Ike with Melee, people are like, well, who the heck is Ike? Oh, he's from Fire Emblem. What's that? So you look into it and you're like, oh, actually, this is my jam. All right, I'm definitely picking that up. Or you're like, oh, well, that's neat. I hate strategy games and I hate tactical games, so I'm never playing Fire Emblem. But I appreciate that he's here. That sort of thing. It opens up like an interesting like bucket of worms for different kind of games and exploring different things. So I appreciate the good variety of characters and good variety of attacks and defense that they all kind of bring to the table. And for the most part, it's themed pretty well. Like the Cave Story characters have like offensive and defensive moves that kind of fit thematically with them. And then like Akuji, the demon guy, kid, or whatever he is, has special moves that feel thematically correct to his thing. Same with even somebody like Johnny Turbo. It still feels thematically correct. Like his offensive move is it slows down the opponent's pieces so they can't be like doing the instant drop. So what I mean as instant drop, I'm surprised I didn't mention this, but like in Tetris, like newer versions of Tetris, if you push up, the pieces drop down automatically. And you can do that too in Crystal Crisis. So that's pretty cool. But moving on, let's actually take a quick break because I feel like I've been recording for quite some time. Holy crap, this is a long episode. I wanted this to be like a 30-minute little rundown, but apparently I can't do that. So let's take a quick break. I'm going to drink my tea because I'm thirsty. Yeah, sorry, I honestly didn't think I'd have this much to talk about this game. But I suppose this is actually good news for me if I ever do a deep dive into an actual Shmups game that actually fits to the theme of this podcast. But consider this my own personal like little workout and practice with a game that you may or may not care about. I don't know. Maybe you just like listening to me ramble. Maybe you just need to fill in that void. Yeah, seriously though, if you want to watch something kind of funny, you need to watch my unboxing video because that ended up being a lot funnier than I thought it'd be. It has, my video content tends to be better than my podcast content, so yeah, even if it's way out of my comfort zone because it's like, it's not scripted. Not saying these podcasts are scripted, these podcasts are never scripted, but I'm far more comfortable just talking straight into a microphone, staring at the wall. I just started staring at the wall, bug-eyed. But I'm far more comfortable doing this sort of thing versus being in front of a camera trying to like unbox something and try to make that as entertaining as possible. It doesn't seem like a good format for a video. Unless I suppose unless I'm with somebody, then maybe I can bounce off them and be the hype man, be like, all right, let's open this box. And then I'm sitting next to him being like, yeah, let's open this box. Woof, woof. Okay. Moving on. Where was I? Oh, yes, that's right. We're going to be talking about the play modes. So, one surprising thing about Crystal Crisis is that it comes with a bunch of play modes that you can do. So, just a quick list. One of them is kind of a spoiler, so as spoilery as a game like this can get, I guess. If anything, it's a selling point, so I don't think it's really a spoiler, but it comes with a story mode, there's an arcade mode, there's an unlockable survival mode, there's, of course, online play as well, there's a tag team mode, which I'll get into in a second. It's not like 2 players against 2 players, I don't think. I didn't really do any multiplayer. I couldn't get my kids to play with me. Even my oldest, who I know enjoys puzzle games, he loves Tetris. And he kind of enjoys Puyo Puyo. He was looking at it, he's like, yeah, no, I'm not going to play that. And I was like, dude, come on, man, you just give it a shot. He's like, all right, maybe. And then, time came around and he was like, whatever, fine. There's a training mode, which allows you to just kind of do whatever you want against an AI. Even if it means they're not doing anything, you can set different things and do whatever. Also, with a lot of this, you can change the rules. So, like, if you don't want, like, the quick drop mechanic or, set different rules. So, like, for online play, you can make your own custom game and be like, look, I want these specific rules and this type of play. I'm looking for that kind of game, right? So, there's good variety and customization when it comes to actual play. And then there's the unlockable inline mode and then unlockable memory mode. Now, I haven't actually unlocked memory mode, so I'm not exactly sure what that means. Maybe mean like some sort of like puzzle mode where it's like you get like this is based off of like other puzzle games and such. So I could be 100% wrong about this, but like I don't know, like what's a good game that would maybe like Puzzle Bobble Bust a Move, where it's like you have a set board and then you have to clear that out, or like in certain versions of knockoff Tetris, you get like levels you have to clear. So like you get a board of randomly placed blocks, and then you have to clear it out. Or with like certain puzzle games where it's like each one is actually specifically crafted, be like, look, you have like this board right here and you have to clear it out in 3 moves. Now go. So, actually, like something like that would be Tetris Attack, aka Puzzle League. So, the puzzle version of that. So maybe that's what memory mode is. I'm not 100% sure. Now, inline mode, when I unlocked it, I was like, it kind of blew my mind for a second. I was like, holy crap, they've just changed the game completely. And I got kind of excited. It's what inline mode is basically a simplified Columns. Now, if you're not familiar with the game Columns, it's an old Sega Genesis puzzle game from the 90s and late 80s that was kind of like their response to Tetris before they really started concentrating on Puyo Puyo. But Columns back in the day was, mildly popular. I wouldn't say it was like super popular or anything, but like what made it kind of neat was that instead of clearing out lines like Tetris or clearing out colors like Puyo Puyo or Dr. Mario, what you do in columns or inline is that when you get a line of 3 or more, it clears out. So for this, like Columns, it doesn't have to be in like that perfect like crisscross. It doesn't have to be exactly touching. It can also be diagonal lines. So what this actually allows is, if you get good at that kind of gameplay, you can actually create some really cool cascades going on, and like it's pretty fun and really satisfying to play once you really get the grasp of how the game works. And because you're only working with 4 colors, it's technically easier than regular Crystal Crisis. There's also no burst meter as well, so you don't have the special moves. It's all just about how well you manipulate the board. And it's supposed to be the kind of easier version of the game, but because it is so much simplified, it ends up being kind of its own version of Columns. And now you may be familiar with Columns and may think to yourself, well, Pong, I hate Columns because it is restrictive as all hell. Because in the original Columns, each block would drop down in like 3 pieces, and it would only shuffle around and rotate what pieces were, on the bottom and in the middle and on the top. With this, because it's a Puzzle Fighter clone instead, you can rotate. So, your columns don't have to be dropping down in columns. They can drop down in twos or be split in half with the wrapping function on the board. So, in a sense, it's far more easier to play than columns and far less infuriating when you mess up, your chain, and way easier, when you mess up your board, and easier to start chaining. And all I have to say is, because since it is a simplified version of columns, I was tearing apart the AI. That is one thing I do want to mention about the AI. To try to get through this game as quickly as possible and get a good grasp of how things are, I was playing almost entirely in normal mode. I did play hard mode a little bit, or the harder modes. But because I wasn't really concentrating on the harder modes, I haven't unlocked master mode yet. I should be able to unlock that pretty soon if I actually start playing the harder modes. But the normal AI, if you're familiar with Puzzle Fighter in general, the normal AI is going to be a cakewalk, because I was able to beat the story mode on my first go. That was the first thing I played. I picked up the story mode. Of course, after the tutorial, because there's a forced tutorial on the first time you play it. And annoyingly, your teacher is Johnny Turbo, which is both great and terrible, because it's Johnny Turbo. But with that, if you're familiar with this type of game, normal mode might be a little bit way too easy, which I think it might be a little bit way too easy for me, because I've played this sort of game in the past and I love puzzle games. So take that into consideration. But if you're completely unfamiliar with these types of games, normal mode is absolutely fine. I can see where some people might start having some trouble. Definitely with the last few stages. It did get maybe a little bit challenging. I lost maybe 2 rounds at this point with normal mode. But each actual fight, I've won every single one. So it's not once you get how the characters work, it's pretty easy to play. But anyways, back on story mode, what made story mode really interesting is that there's branching paths. Now, unlike a lot of story modes, you don't just choose one character and play that character all through the story. What happens is that the story itself doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I didn't really pay attention too much, but it's explain how this crossover works is all these heroes of all the different games are coming together and fighting each other because they don't know each other. So when they come across each other, they fight each other. So Princess Solange is a good guy, and the 1001 Spikes guy is a good guy. But once they first meet, they don't know that they're both good guys, so they have to fight, because they're both trying to fight for these red crystals, which I think are evil. And each level, if you choose a character and beat your opponent, so chapter 1, let's say it's Quote and it's somebody else, I don't remember who. Yeah, I think it's Quote and Aban, which is chapter 1. So depending on who you choose, that's the storyline that carries over several chapters later. So at that point, if you choose Quote and you beat Aban, Aban or Aben is defeated, and you move on from there. And Quote comes back later in the story mode as a character you choose to play as against a boss. So that's pretty neat. And with that, it actually creates branching paths all leading to the same ending. But with this, it helps unlock other characters. So depending on what characters you choose in the story mode, you end up playing different kind of opponents and different dialogue plays out, and it's pretty fun. It's neat. Outside of that, story mode is story mode. It's not anything too crazy. But moving on, we've got arcade mode, which has a normal, hard, and harder, and master mode, or something like that, where it's it's your basic arcade mode. For normal mode or easy mode, whatever it's called, you only do 6 fights, and in medium, it's 8. And then in hard, it's 10, and it gets progressively harder, and then your opponents are randomized. So, pretty good stuff. Survival mode is exactly like it sounds like. You just play an endless game against random fighters until you KO them, and then it moves on to the next fighter. And it gets progressively harder and harder. So, yeah, that's survival mode. Online mode, I didn't actually play it at all because I didn't want to sit around for like 10 minutes for a pool of players that doesn't exist. Because as far as I know, the game hasn't officially released yet, so I won't really be able to really dig my teeth into online mode until it officially releases. So, whatever. Though I did check out the online mode to see what all was there in terms of options. There's, of course, ranked play and unranked play, which is pretty cool. You know, it's nice that the option is there. It's not like mind-blowing that you have ranked and unranked matches, but it's nice that the option is there. You know, like I said before, you could do custom games, or you can connect with friends online and play against your friends. There's also a versus mode, which I forgot to mention, but that's like local co-op, or like with the Switch, I'd assume like wireless play. With this friend option and online mode, just this online mode in general, I don't know if there's crossplay. So keep that in mind if that bothers you, or if it's like a big selling point for you. I don't know if there's crossplay, and I don't know if there's an Xbox version coming out just yet. I'm assuming there would be. Nicalis, aka Nicalis, does a lot of like pretty much everything. They're scattered in terms of like what consoles they release on. So I'd assume there'd probably be a PC release at some point, maybe an Xbox One release, or maybe a release on whatever next-gen console. If the next-gen console comes out next year, I wouldn't be surprised if they came out with a version of this. If it sells well and they're like, all right, well, this is actually way more popular of a game than we thought, so we might as well just make a version for PS5 and Xbox Scarlet, or whatever it's going to be called. I think Scarlet is the secret name. I think that's a name I've heard thrown around amongst like other gaming podcasts, so I could be wrong about that. Correct me if I'm wrong, at bullethelloemail@gmail.com. Now, one unlockable mode that I really want to talk... You can tell that my voice is getting dry. But one unlockable mode that I really wanted to talk about was tag team, because I was really enjoying tag team. Now, in regular matches, it's best 2 out of 3 rounds that wins the match. Now, with tag team, you only have 1 round. But what helps this from feeling like it's too short of a game or too long of a game, and you'll understand what I mean as in too long of a game once I explain the mode, but with tag team mode, instead of just choosing 1 character, you choose 2. And instead of just having 1 playfield, you technically have 2. So, let's say, hypothetically, you choose the Knight, the Hydra Knight. And as your second character, you choose Astro Boy. So, because you chose the Knight first, your Knight is the Knight guy is going to be the first character you play as, and it's his playfield. And when you're on his playfield, your burst attacks and burst defense is going to be what your burst what your burst move is going to be. But now let's say you're going up against your opponent and they're like ripping you to shreds and filling up your playfield really fast, and you're panicking because your burst meter isn't good enough, like isn't high enough to do like anything like really effective. So you're thinking to yourself, okay, how do I get out of this little pinch? Well, you hit the L or the R button and it tags you out and switches to the other player, because now that you've chosen Astro Boy, let's say you haven't played Astro Boy at all in this match, because it's Astro Boy's playfield, his playfield is completely empty. And at that point, you can restart your strategy and try to like beat it out. Now, if one of your tag team characters gets knocked out, aka their playfield gets completely filled up, they become unplayable and it switches over to your other character's playfield. So at that point, now you're doing a 1 against 2 match if you haven't knocked out any of your opponent's team. If that makes any sense. Now, where some really fun strategy comes into play for this is like Johnny Turbo. His like attack burst is this thing called now loading. I'm looking at the instruction manual right now. And what that does, I've explained this a little bit before and earlier in this podcast, but what that does is that it slows down the pieces so you can't do that instantaneous drop, which means the player has to move at a slower pace for like a few turns. And what this could do is you can use Johnny Turbo's attack burst and then switch over to like Zombie with his infection, and because they're moving at a slower pace, they can't get rid of those infected blocks quicker. So like with this, there could be like some good strategy involved, and like I don't know the meta. I haven't really dug into the meta at all here, like a whole bunch, but I'm pretty sure there's some characters that really complement others. I used Johnny Turbo and Zombie as an example, but I don't know how well they actually do as a team. But with this in mind, if you're really hardcore into this sort of game, that's definitely something that you would definitely have fun looking into, like kind of balancing out, okay, well, this character actually works really well with this character, or I know my opponent likes using these two characters, so I'm going to choose this character and then choose this other character because the other character complements the character that counters those two characters really well. So, there's some good strategy involved with tag team, and I enjoy that. I always enjoy it when you start adding more elements to the strategy. I always like more complicated like gameplay, and it really kind of added quite a bit to the whole like puzzle fighter formula that wasn't there before. So kudos to Nicalis for doing that. That's pretty cool. It was pretty fun. I enjoyed it. I'm quite surprised at how enjoyable tag team mode actually is. It's pretty cool. Now, moving on, let's talk about this physical edition that I actually picked up. Now, you can actually see my live reaction unboxing, like I said earlier, on my channel. Links are down below in the description below, but really fast. This instruction manual is pretty cool. It's not like super crazy or anything. It's not like an old Civilization instruction manual that has like 60 pages in it or like 100 pages in it, But I'm really happy that they included an instruction manual because it really adds to like the buying factor of getting physical instead of digital. And I really enjoy that. And it's a well-made instruction manual, well-made enough. It's pretty cute, pretty pictures and all that. Of course, with a lot of these modern instruction manuals, how few of them there are. There's no like notes page that you can like scribble on. Not saying I ever scribbled in the notes section of my instruction manuals, because for some reason, even when I was a kid, I was like, no, don't mess up the instruction manual. You'll kill the collector's value or the resale value. It's split up into a whole bunch of different sections. You've got how to play. It talks about the crystals and different kind of crystals that show up in the game. Basic controls, on-screen info, game modes. Biggest section obviously is the characters, and then finally tips and tricks. But it's good stuff. I like this game, and the instruction manual is nice. Another thing that came in the physical copy was a little puzzle cube, like a fidget cube. It's like an infinity cube, so it folds out, folds back in, and it folds out, folds back in, and it's like a Mobius strip cube. So if you enjoy that kind of thing, the physical version comes with it. There's no discerning like markings on the cube, so if you just look at the cube, you won't be like, oh, that's from Crystal Crisis, or that's from a puzzle game, or even a video game. It's just a red cube. But it's still pretty cool. Hours of enjoyment if you're into fidget toys, but 2 seconds of enjoyment if you don't. Though it was funny, my sister saw that and she was like, oh, I love this thing. And then like my kids saw it and they're like, oh man, I love these things. I was like, all right, well, fine. Great for them. It worked out for them. The last thing I want to mention about this physical edition real fast, if you don't watch the unboxing, is that it actually comes in a big box with a standard case on the inside. And that's pretty cool. It's good for like display if you're into that, I would assume. And the cover art is excellent, and it has a nice like pop arty effect to the logo of the Crystal Crisis game logo. So it's pretty cool. It has like a bunch of the characters on the front and all like jumping out from like cubes and stuff. And Isaac, of course, is sitting in like a little cube cavity, crying his eyes out, as Isaac does. But pretty good stuff. It's rated E10, I believe. Let's double check the box here. Yeah, rated E10. There's not really anything in the game I'd say is like horribly offensive. Actually, hold up. Maybe some of the outfits are a little bit risque for like people that are really sensitive to that sort of thing, but for the most part it's pretty cute and very family friendly. It's rated E10 for fantasy, violence, mild language, and suggestive themes. Because one of the characters is a vampire, I think, and the other one is a demon. And if you're familiar with Code of Princess, Princess Solange basically just wears a bikini, or the royal traditional armor, quote unquote, from the game, which is pretty wacky if you're into like that kind of like borderline ecchi humor. Anime talk right there. But yeah, we're going to take a quick break before I conclude my thoughts on this and give my final rating. And I'm back. So like I said before, all the bumper music is music from the game, so if you're really liking the music, the bumper music here, and that's a selling point for you, maybe take that into consideration, because obviously I give this game a serious thumbs up. I'd almost say a 10 out of 10 experience, because they took the Super Puzzle Fighter formula and added quite a bit to it and added a whole bunch of modes. Now, pricing wise, I think it's fair. It's a good digital price of only $20, so it's definitely more on the budget side, but still having like a lot of quality and love put into the game. The physical edition itself is $40, and that might be a little bit pricey for some people in terms of puzzle games, but for what it is, it's a good price. So I honestly say it's a 10 out of 10 experience, because yeah, it's Puzzle Fighter at its core, but with the wrapping mechanic and then like the burst attacks and like with so many different kind of modes and customization in the modes and how you play, and plus that weird like simplified columns inline mode that you have here, there's a lot here to play and unpack, and quite a bit of unlockables, and there's like weird little achievements that kind of push you towards replaying the game a whole bunch of times. And for that, I'm going to say this is definitely a worthy replacement for Puzzle Fighter if you want to play Puzzle Fighter but on a new system. Crystal Crisis is a definite buy if you're into Super Puzzle Fighter 2. I wouldn't say it's everyone's cup of tea, as I saw with my kids who, for the most part, aren't like super into puzzle games, except for my oldest and my middle kid who do like puzzle games, but they weren't like super like involved in like watching the gameplay. They're like, I don't know, I'd rather play Tetris from the looks of it. Even though, the cascades are cool and they're watching me, who's a kind of a seasoned puzzle gamer, play the game, and they're like, okay, that is pretty impressive that you're getting cascades going, but I think I'd still enjoy Tetris more. Maybe it's not necessarily your cup of tea, but if you do like your arcade puzzlers, I highly recommend this. Art-wise, it's really good. The only drawback, I would say, is the load times. And maybe those couple moments where I think there was lag. But it wasn't, like, terrible. And that didn't really take away from the entire experience of the game. Because once you're actually in the matches, I didn't really notice any lag or anything. It was actually pretty solid, even for being the Switch version. Now, I'm pretty sure the PS4 version runs perfectly, and the load times would probably be fixed in like a PC version. So honestly, if that bothers you, or if that sounds like a huge bother to you, maybe pick up the PS4 version, or if they release a PC version, pick that up. But for being Puzzle Fighter on the Switch, this is definitely the best you're going to get. Because God only knows Capcom ain't going to do anything with Puzzle Fighter. And even if they do, it's going to be filled with microtransactions like Puzzle Fighter Mobile. And nobody wants that. Even me, who kind of liked the Puzzle Fighter mobile game, it wasn't bad. It was just, I don't want to play on a touchscreen. I want the physical controller. Even if it's like that weird D-button, 4-button D-pad, I don't care. I would still rather play on a controller. Definitely for a puzzle game. But overall, for people that aren't familiar with Puzzle Fighter, but you love like arcade puzzlers or PvP puzzle games, I would still highly recommend this because this is the best of its kind. And there's 2 other games that are currently out on PC Steam that are similar to this. That, like I've mentioned it before, Heroes Never Lose, Professor Puzzler's Perplexing Ploy. And there's another one called Raining Blobs, which is kind of like Puzzle Fighter, but like if Puzzle Fighter was hybridized with Puyo Puyo Blobs instead of blocks. So maybe look into those 2 if you don't have a Switch or a PS4 and you only play on PC. So maybe look into that. But outside of that, Crystal Crisis is amazing, and you all need to play it if you love your puzzle games. So yeah, maybe 9 out of 10 because of the lag issue, the loading times. But you know what? 10 out of 10 just for the straight up gameplay, because it is so refreshing to play an absolutely solid puzzle game that's not like a franchise I'm already familiar with. And this is a new franchise. I'm really hoping to come out with more. I'm really hoping to come out with some DLC of like maybe adding like 5 more characters for like $5 or $10 or something like that. I don't know. It really depends on how well this game sells, because if it sells like stupid well, I could see them possibly adding DLC. I don't know. I don't know what their plans are with this game. But for the most part, like I said, I highly recommend it. I really like it. It's really good stuff. And I think that kind of concludes my first impressions coverage of Crystal Crisis out on Switch. That does release on the 28th. I'm not under any kind of review embargo, so don't get worried about the Sensei. I didn't sign anything, and I didn't get this copy for free. I bought it off a store shelf, so this is really just a customer review. So, go check it out. I love it. It's a good game. Good stuff. With that, if you're listening to this over on YouTube, this is the Bullet Hello Shmupcast, where I mostly cover shmups. Anything from bullet hell, danmaku, twin stick, horizontal, classic fixed shooters, sometimes some run and gun on rare occasion. I usually say twin stick on rare occasion, but sometimes run and gun, so that may include Cuphead if you're not familiar with shmups. But that's a maybe, because Cuphead's not really a shmup. But like games like the Toho games, or like Ikaruga, or even old retro stuff if it pertains to the news. If you are into shmups, and this is the first Shmups cast you ever heard, like Shmups specific podcast you've come across, I do recommend the Electric Underground by MarkMSX, or Shoot the Corecast by the RFGeneration guys. Go check those guys out. Links are all in the description below. And if you want to contact me, you can send your angry emails at bullethelloemail@gmail.com. If you're listening to this on the RSS feed, my YouTube channel is youtube.com/Sensei Pong, or you can find me out on Twitter at Sensei_Pong. All these links are down below in the description below. And yeah, that's about it. I don't know. I've never done an extra credits episode. I'm really bad at ending these sort of things, so I should just cut myself off now and say, until next time, feed another credit in the machine, man. Extra credits. That's a horrible closer. Don't credit feed. Black